Thank you. Thank you very much. The workshop number 4 was on improving the quality of electoral and parliamentary process. This workshop attempted to demonstrate through examination of specific cases how free, fair, and regular elections and effective parliamentary oversight of the executive, among other issues, can foster trust and promote good governance. I would now like to invite Mr. Martin Chungong, Director, Division for the Promotion of Democracy in Inter-Parliamentary Union. Martin, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me pleasure to present to you the findings of the 4th workshop, which was co-organized by the Inter-Parliamentary Union and the International Institute for Democracy and Electoral Assistance, IDEA. As you said, Mr. Chair, we looked at ways and means of improving upon the quality of electoral and parliamentary processes. And looking at electoral processes, we first of all looked at how these processes are organized and how the disputes arising from them are resolved. In this particular regard, we stressed the key role played by electoral management bodies in building trust in electoral processes. We looked at the main factors that contribute to effective EMBs, which include fearless independence of these institutions, the selection, appointment, and security of tenure of their commissioners, the importance of professionalism, sustainability, financing, and knowledge development. In addition to an effective management of the electoral cycle, the resolution of electoral disputes is of paramount importance for building trust in electoral processes. Effective dispute resolution should be transparent, fair, and timely. Often, bodies independent of the executive and also of the judiciary ensure greater trust in electoral dispute resolution. Regarding ways and means of fostering participation and trust, participants in the workshop focused attention on youth. While all age groups could benefit from wider civic education, key target groups of voter education should be the younger people. The electoral and education communities should therefore work together to address their needs. This is true for developed countries, and while it is also true for developing countries, their democratic dynamics make it even more important. Looking at the necessary reforms, the participants felt that this reform should be handled with care, given that institutional changes may affect voter turnout, but their impact will be measured only after 10 years and sometimes even after more than 40 years. There was also the need addressed to build timely and comprehensive frameworks for participation and inclusion. And in this regard, it was stressed that it's important to ensure that not only institutional frameworks, but wider economic and legal frameworks in new communities promote the rule of law rather than personalism and clientelism. The issue of political protest was also addressed, Mr. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, and here we saw that the profile of protesters is similar in both stable and fragile democracies. Political protest is rarely a backlash against democracy. Protesters do not generally lack trust in democracy, and both in mature and fragile democracies, they protest because they lack confidence in their government and seek better. In general, there is a need for more work on trust, protest, and participation in developing countries. Regarding effective electoral assistance, it was stressed that this assistance should shift from being an event-driven phenomenon into a process-driven assistance. This means that there should be investment in long-term support to electoral institutions throughout electoral cycles, and also to support the entire process. It was also stressed that there was too much emphasis on observation and on election campaign period and polling day, and that not enough emphasis was given or placed on technical assistance during the electoral cycle and the post-election period. The need was also stressed for coordinated and harmonized approaches to electoral assistance. Gender issues need to be taken into consideration, and generally inclusiveness should be the order of the day, which means that minority and marginalized groups need to be taken into consideration. Of course, the context of elections received particular attention, especially post-conflict context, where timing and sequencing of elections was very important for the development of democratic institutions. One last point that was made with regard to the electoral support was the adoption of technology, and here, while participants considered that it was important to adopt new technologies, caution was advised, taking into consideration issues of sustainability, maintenance, cost effectiveness, and the danger of being vendor-driven. Having analyzed the electoral process, participants also looked at the outcome of these processes, and that is parliamentary institutions in many circumstances. And here, the first comment that was made was that parliaments are facing a crisis of legitimacy, and they need to be reinvented, to borrow the term of this forum. So a number of factors were identified: the ineffectiveness and the unrepresentativeness of many parliaments. Parliamentarians are seen to be self-centered, corrupt, and have short-term outlooks. There is an increasing gap between Parliament and the people do not feel that Parliament is representing their interests. Lack of accountability, lack of public understanding of the role of Parliament and parliamentarians, the rubber stamp legacy that parliaments have, undue political party influence on the work of parliaments and parliamentarians, and generally lack of resources. So what can we do to fix this situation? Participants thought that parliaments, in order to regain trust, should be representative, should be open, should be accessible, should be accountable and transparent in their work, and above all, should be effective. And we looked at some of the mechanisms for this to happen. We looked at representative parliaments, where we said that parliament should be sociologically representative, that is, representative of all components of society. Special emphasis was laid on women's participation, where it was noted that while there have been inroads and progress, women still remain underrepresented in political institutions. And a number of factors were identified, but solutions such as affirmative action, quota allocations, reserve seats were also considered to be temporary measures to help increase women's participation. Political parties were also encouraged to be more proactive in giving opportunities for women to be elected to parliament, and some participants even stressed the importance of some basic legislation to force the hand of political parties to adopt a long-term integrative approach. Financial resources were identified as a limiting factor for women's participation, and here participants suggested that there should be capacity building, but also funding for women to be able to play on a level playing field with men when it comes to election. Of course, marginalized and other disadvantaged groups should also be represented in parliament, such as the disabled, women, the youth. Women are mentioned, the youth, minorities, be they cultural or ethnic, and so on and so forth. Now, the other point that was made for representative parliaments was that they should be inclusive and representative in their procedures, and we looked at mechanisms such as the establishment of caucuses, networking between women parliamentarians to drive gender issues, capacity building, inclusion of the opposition, women and minority groups in the workings of parliament, and the organization of business of parliament to allow for all to participate. For example, organizing working hours that are convenient for women, and providing facilities for the disabled. We also looked at transparency and accountability, and here we said that for Parliament to be able to exercise effective oversight of the government, it should be transparent and accountable in its own proceedings. And we looked at various mechanisms. Parliament should be open. We looked at, for example, the need to publicize parliamentary proceedings, facilitate media coverage of parliamentary proceedings, promote freedom of information, that is, access to information for the public, and build constituency outreach. Other elements for an accountable parliament include promoting codes of conduct for